Watching this moment today, you could tell today's fist bumps, the fist bumps which have been a signal to the cop in title chases past. We need you. We're in this together. Today, those fist bumps were very much for him. It's Rog, and this is the Men in Blazers video podcast presented by the GFOPs at Camarena. It's the most awarded tequila. It's Sunday. We back like the Boston Bruins after a wacky footballing Sunday. Let's be honest. The title race goes on in its strange, relentless way, a bit like the Kentucky Derby, photo finish style, going right down to the very last nose hair. Both Arsenal and Manchester City holding nerve and serve, an immensely emotional, almost exhibition game feeling at Anfield in Jurgen Klopp's penultimate game this morning. Chelsea are alive, suddenly obliterating all comers in a way that not to be knee-jerk, but that can only lead to one sane conclusion. Todd Burley is a footballing genius, and Manchester United fans, you had the best weekend ever. Mostly because your team doesn't play until tomorrow. We will unpack every delicious little sausage of a detail with my friend, the New York Times chief soccer correspondent, the poet laureate of Harrogate. It's Mr. Rory Smith.
How you doing?
Raw, I'm good because I'm with you, mate. And mostly because it means you survived a week on the road of Champions League journeying in Deutschland, no less. We'll go deeper on this Tuesday when we preview the Champions League semi-final second legs in our European Nights podcast. But give us the best story of your German invasion with the British press pack, all that bratwurst und beer in Dortmund and Munich. What was the lasting memory?
Well, the lasting memory for my microbiome was all of the sauerkraut. I think that's really important to note that I have tremendous gut health now. The two great games. The Bayern Real game was two of Europe's heavyweights pounding at each other. Dortmund, the second half of Dortmund PSG proved to me my one of my theories, Rog, that the best games involve no goals. Dortmund PSG second half was brilliant as nobody scored.
You must have loved Brentford Fulham then.
We're about four. It's the journey as much as the destination on that one, I think. But there were about 40 chances, and no one scored. PSG hit the post twice in 10 seconds at one point. Dortmund missed about 4 sitters, but it was thrilling because you felt as though the next goal was the big one, and it just never came, which just left you with this feeling of anticipatory joy. And the other thing that struck me was just the extent to which the Champions League semi-finals take over cities. Dortmund is a small place. It's a football club with the town attached, essentially, Dortmund. So you expect to kind of get out of the train station and see nothing but yellow shirts and a big gaggle of PSG ultras. But even in Munich, which is a big city, a rich city, one of those cities with lots of things to do, walking down the Marienplatz towards the Rathaus and these big tourist destinations, huge gaggles of Madrid fans singing, setting off flares, chanting, a big picture of Carlo Ancelotti dressed up to look like the guy off the cover of GTA, and the songs just sort of wafting through these baroque streets, and you sense that this major metropolis, really, Munich, has been taken over by this single event. Everyone in Bayern shirts, a guy carrying around like a tinfoil European Cup. That's commitment. He wasn't a child. He was a grown up who clearly made it himself. Anything
handicrafting at night under his craft lamp, making that tinfoil Champions League trophy.
What other tournament, what other sport leads 60-year-olds to do arts and crafts?
The Florida Cup, my friend, the big one. I'm not going to say I didn't make a giant Florida Cup out of paper mache before Everton landed that trophy, but I'm not going to say it. And talking about wonders, tournaments won, almost kind of won. I do want to start by raising a third first Michelob Ultra of the day to a new Premier League friend coming up from the Championship. It's Ipswich Town. Truly magical team. Stunning story, really. Who yesterday were promoted to the Premier League after back-to-back promotions from League One last season. They will now be in the Premier League. Ed Sheeran's boys beat out Leeds and Southampton, amongst others, despite operating on just 15% of the budget. They are a historically deeply traditional team from East Anglia. That's England's agricultural rump. I think Shades, I asked you all over Twitter, what is the American version of Ipswich? You kind of threw in shades of Wisconsin meets North Carolina. It's truly beautiful, scenic farm country. And now they're back in the Premier League, the Tractor Boys, after 22 years away. I am thrilled for so many reasons. In a weekend in which Tom Brady's Birmingham City self-immolated their way into relegation to League One, Ipswich are a magical story of the opposite, of American owners coming in, a group called Game Changer 20, and doing it right. They knew what they didn't know. They brought in a really smart CEO, Mark Aston. He empowered a deeply intelligent young coach, Kieran McKenna, who swapped an assistant role at Manchester United for East Anglia back in 2021. And he's only experienced promotions with his innovative buccaneering tactics since then. Ipswich, they're a grand old team. They've got real pedigree. When I was a kid, they won trophies, domestic and European, under the legendary Bobby Robson, just the most avuncular and wonderfully spirited of English managers in the 1980s. But I'm particularly elated, personally, because my partner in pod, producer JW, is a lifelong Ipswich fan, fell in love with the team. Like so many Americans, he was a 10-year-old military brat living in Mottlesome Heath. His dad is a retired American fighter pilot, a colonel. So in 1992, his family was stationed at RAF Woodbridge, Bentwaters, and he's followed this team in times of challenge, times of wonder. And on the day Ipswich finally got promoted, they've been in the bowels of English football for over half his life. J-Dub celebrated with his own 3-year-old son, Finn, who has come to appreciate football at the greatest time, celebrating Ipswich, a club he calls the Horsey team because of their badge. I'm so happy for him. So happy for all Ipswich Nation. But for the first time in Men in Blazers history, J-Dub's team will be big league. They'll be taking 6 points guaranteed off Everton next year. Have to find your other 34 from other people, J-Dubs. J-Dubs wrote a beautiful post on Instagram. He said to be able to watch every minute of every game will be an embarrassment of riches. To have people on these shores in America know what team I'm talking about, or at least have heard of Ipswich Town. The once imaginary friend will now be at every family event. And while the brutal, unforgiving nature of the Premier League may make all of that fleeting, says J-Dubs, I'm going to savor every second of it. I don't think it will be fleeting. It's a really well-run club. It's a beautiful part of the country. If you are in London, get yourself out to a game. Drive out to East Anglia, to Ipswich, to the journey, to the Horsey team. Raw, they're an incredible story, an incredible team.
Yeah, Ipswich occupy a really interesting place in kind of English football history. I'm too young to remember that team under Bobby Robson that won trophies, but they were one of the first teams to really kind of invest in and think about buying players from abroad, because they had Arnold Muir and Franz Tyson, two Dutch maestros,
Incredible
in that team.
footballers. They were like gods just landing amongst us.
It was when we in Britain realised that the Dutch are better than us. That was the lesson of Muir and Tyson, and we've never really got over it. But then even in the late 90s, they were a mainstay in the Premier League. They felt very much like the coming force, and then they celebrated by getting relegated, which is, that is what English teams should do. And they've been gone for too long, Ipswich. And it's I have no affiliation to them at all. I do have a horse in that race, another horse, a Leeds United shaped horse that will fall in the playoffs. But for Ipswich to come back, especially the way they've done it, two promotions on the spin, Kieran McKenna, first 2 years of management. I think he might be the first coach ever to do that. He's certainly one of very few coaches who've got successive promotions to the top division. I think there's 5. But to do it in his first 2 years is extraordinary. They play great football. The big risk for Ipswich now is that a job comes up in the summer and McKenna thinks that might be long-term a safer bet. If Brighton were to become available, say, he might be tempted. If they can keep hold of him, they'll put up a good fight next season.
Just saying those two names, Muren and Tyson, these two Dutch players came over to play in our league. This is when a foreign player felt like he was coming from Wales or Ireland. I will just say, it was the first time as a kid I realized that when you took control of the ball, you didn't just have to boot it as hard and as far as you could. These two incredible human beings, it was like watching them make sweet love to the ball in public. There was nothing filthy about it. It was eye-opening and startling. And Ipswich, my God, may you have that effect on the top flight one more time. As you mentioned, Godspeed to the 4 teams who have made the Championship playoffs. Leeds United, Will Ferrell reported to have brought into that club's ownership. God, I hope they come up. Southampton, West Bromwich Albion, and Ipswich, East Anglian rivals, Norwich City. So many great Josh Sargent goals, firing them into contention. First leg next Sunday. Second legs are following Thursday and Friday. Godspeed to all of them. From dreaming of the Premier League to the Premier League itself, Raw. Let's start in the sunshine. What? Yes, at the Emirates for Arsenal 3, Bournemouth 1. A year to the day, a shell-shocked Arsenal conceded to then relegation-threatened Cherries within 9 bloody seconds. Needed a 97th minute Reece Nelson goal to eke out victory from a 2-0 hole to keep that pretense of a title charge last year. The two teams met again. Bournemouth, different proposition under Andoni Iraola. Again, incredibly born less than 3 months and 6 miles away from Mikel Arteta. The two were childhood friends, played together on a unpronounceable Basque youth team. Arsenal, top of the table now, unchanged team from the London Derby glory. They knew Bournemouth had just 1 win in 15 games against them, and they opened with confidence, feasted on the ball, possession, movement, sunshine, Ødegaard passing long, passing short, setting tempo. At the outset, this was like a special forces shooting gallery at poor Cherries keeper Mark Travers. Pressure, relentless. I think 16 shots in the first half. Bournemouth going block city. Declan Rice, one of many Arsenal players, blasting wide with the goal at their mercy. Anxiety starting to build up with every miss. But then the big moment, 41 minutes. Kai Havertz whack-a-whacked in by Ødegaard. Goalkeeper Travers came out to meet him. I think Barney Renee wrote in The Guardian of the penalty that ensued. If Kai Havertz falls in a crowded penalty area and nobody touches him, but someone does also kind of touch him, is that a penalty? ... Well, is it, Raw?
The problem with these ones, where Havertz very obviously bought the contact, he leaves his leg trailing in a way that is not what could be described as natural, is that sometimes they are given and sometimes they are not. And I think what happened with this incident in particular is that the referee was deemed not to have made a clear and obvious error, so the VAR couldn't overturn it. But to your average fan, which is the number I count myself in, it looks an awful lot like a lot of penalties that haven't been given or have been overturned. And although they might be, I think on some technical refereeing level, they're a bit different. To most people, they don't look different. So I understand why it was given. I understand why the referee blew the whistle and pointed to the spot. I understand why the VAR didn't overturn it. I don't think it was a penalty, and I don't understand why we are in this position of not being certain what a penalty is and what a penalty is not.
It's like, I love music, but I do get lost on Instagram when my favorite guitarists start to do a long post about the difference between their guitar pedals. You're saying the difference in this penalty was at that level of technical refereeing decision. I'm sure the Germans have a word for dragging your foot against the goalkeeper to earn a penalty. But I do know Saka stepped up, rolled home his 60th goal of the season, cooler than a polar bear's toenail from the spot. And breathe, Arsenal fans. Second half, more purposeful Bournemouth. Played like a boxer who knew they'd get one shot. It came. Solanke on the break, Raya down to smother. Golden glove Raya, it should be noted. Mikel Arteta made sure that I said that. Bournemouth picked their moments, kept getting for a spell in behind Arsenal. I think Kluivert celebrated a near miss like he was a YouTuber hyping himself up, playing on FIFA. Nerves of a different type started to fill the Emirates. Ødegaard playing majestically, but constantly both signalling the press and trying to whip up, almost conduct the crowd on repeat. And it came as some relief when Declan Rice span round like a record baby. A delicious flick, caressed the ball out to Trossard. Gent has like one finish now in the final third of the season, but it never misses. He put some whip, some nay-nay, and then goes full on Belgian Warby Parker. 16 goals on the season for him. But back to that generous refereeing thing, big picture rule. There was a Bournemouth goal then disallowed. Dominic Solanke contact with David Raya. Solanke contact, which could only be described, I think, as very, very Ben White-ish at every corner on the goalkeeper. And Raw, over here is the NBA playoffs right now, and you can really feel the refereeing. often just tonally generous to one team and less to another. Occasionally you think, they've been told, the referees, to keep the series tight in these playoffs. Did this game feel, let's just say, Arsenal generous to you in the officialing?
So the Bournemouth disallowed goal was a weird one because, like, culturally, I've been brought up to think that if you touch a goalkeeper, it's a free kick, which is the way that it's been refereed for so long now that when I watched it live, you thought immediately that's a foul. That's going to be a foul. They played on for like 10 seconds afterwards, and you're trying to think, what's the point in this? That was a foul. You're going to blow your whistle at some point. But then watching on the replay, didn't really touch him. There was a bit of a kind of melee because a Bournemouth player and an Arsenal defender were locked in some sort of embrace. I didn't actually think Solanke did anything to Riot. He was kind of penalised for being in the vicinity of the goalkeeper. Maybe once you're the Golden Glove, there's an assumption that you are precious and can't be touched.
Your aura.
People aren't allowed near you. Yeah,
They're
your
not
aura.
allowed in your aura. Aura infractions.
There's like a force field around you. But so it felt natural that on one level that the goal would be ruled out. But yeah, taken together with the penalty, I don't know if it's anything nefarious, is it? It's just that referees, I think, on some kind of human level, maybe have a higher bar for what they're prepared to do if it's going to define the course of the season. Does Bournemouth score at that point? You never know. Maybe that costs Arsenal the win. Maybe Arsenal get nervous and suddenly Bournemouth are back in the game. And then they draw, and then that's the title race over and done with. So maybe the referees do want to be absolutely certain before they make any major calls.
I do feel there's Premier League scriptwriters. In fact, I know there's Premier League scriptwriters. Let me just be bold and be honest and go out there objectively. I think it's very hard for the referees to, at this stage of the season, go against the script writing. I think that's where the PGMOL gets into serious trouble when they go against the writers' union. But then Declan Rice finished it off at the death anyway. Fine goal, joyful release, his salute celebration. GFOP at T Regars hints at us. Declan Rice, what a player. Oh, surely we owe West Ham some money. I think that's how it works. 14 wins from 16 for Arsenal now. 26 wins on the season, which I think is joint most for the club in the Premier League era. I'm old enough to remember when Arsenal were said to be chokers, which made me so unbelievably impressed by the performance in and of itself, but also within the context. This is a super young Arsenal team. We've got to remember that. The players' adrenaline taking out field would have been surging. You can almost see how Arteta is trying to manage that by bringing his own natural levels of just chaos and mayhem. And just, he's a naturally frantic gent, but he's trying to rein it in. When they score, I mean, it's normally an Arteta-gasm on the sideline. You watch him, he's keeping it in. Don't repress it, Mikel. Let it out. But you've got to know, with these kids, the fear of failure would have been perpetually gnawing back of mind. There's several points in this game. Chance after chance not taken in the first half would have definitely reinforced whatever natural anxiety was in there. Yes, the penalty decision generous. But this Arsenal team won a very tricky fixture against a tactically astute opponent, Raw, with discipline, focus, and a relentless determination. There was so much to be impressed about as a neutral.
Yeah, and Bournemouth are a formed team. I think since they had that awful start under Iraola, where they didn't win any of their first 8 games, and you naturally
reverse Ange.
He'd be sacked. They do you know what? They are the exact opposite of Tottenham Hotspur. But since then,
are you saying if you buckle Spurs start with Bournemouth's close, you are probably vying for the title right now?
Not even that. I think you have sewn
like
up the title,
clear.
sewn it up in April. You looked at that and thought, right, Iraola's done really well in Spain. It's clearly not worked out. This was a risk. There was a lot of people waiting for him to fail because Bournemouth had sacked Gary O'Neill, and it had been decided by the sort of broader football industrial complex,
the Premier League scriptwriters,
should not have been sacked. Since mid to late October, Iraola has been possibly a manager of the season contender. I think only the top 4 have taken more points than Bournemouth since October, which is astonishing. They've also got a really young team. So this was a tricky fixture. This was a real potential banana skin, not least because it was the one game that Arsenal would have thought that'll be okay. It's Bournemouth at home, and that's a dangerous place to be in a title race. For Arsenal to have had that wobble against Villa, a few weeks ago, to have roared back, to look as good as they have all season, to be laying down these records, these watermarks, is incredibly impressive. You can still see, I'm going to say diplomatically, like the places where Arsenal can improve. What I mean is they need a central midfielder who's not Thomas Partey. But there's no question there is a sense that there is an Arsenal title coming. This team feels good enough to win a title. It is growing. It's getting better all the time. It might not be this season, but they'll go into next season as the absolute favourites to challenge Manchester City.
Two things. Number one, Arsenal, call me. I'll sell you Andrew Gomez for 80 million. Secondly, I love your theory about Iraola. First of all, we had Bill Foley, the Las Vegas Golden Knights Bournemouth owner, on the show. I think it was like September, October. And I'd read, that they'd run the data. They'd seen if they stayed with Gary O'Neill, it wouldn't lead to anything good. And so they realized ran the data and Iraola would lead to wonder. But it did. I gave them the chance to say that. It did feel just like a lot more gut sense. And they were struggling in those early days. I love the notion of Spurs takeoff almost to the season, and you fuse that with Bournemouth's landing, and you will get a title winner. Bournemouth, you Las Vegas Golden Cherries fans, listen to this one. Iraola plus Sean Dyche's tracksuit, ... I'm not saying, I'm just saying that is what you need to the top four. Dude needs his own signature look. He is ferreting around for one. This week he unveiled as if he just slept over at Mikel Arteta's house and just worn his second black all outfit. You need that tracksuit. You'll be unstoppable. Talking about unstoppable, though, up north we go to Manchester, where those four-peat seeking Manchester City lads played next and held serve and end serve. Man City 5, Wolves 1. I'm reading that out with a sadness of Arsenal fans who are, I believe, no doubt, bellowed Warren Zevon's Werewolves of London in full voice before kickoff. They did have a crevice of hope. This was Wolves who'd won the reverse fixture September 2-1, but Rodri wasn't playing then. So I'm not even sure that win legally counts. Anyway, how different the world feels now. City, second place, 1 point back with that crucial game in hand, and the title really in their own control. Unbeaten in 31 before kickoff. A team who appear to dig deep when they need to and win almost by habit. Suspense in this one lasted about 10 minutes. Stunning trademark Bernardo, deep pushback. Gvardiol slapped a shot over the bar. That's what it looked like first time around. But slow-mo, we saw he'd been judged to have been caught by Ait-Nouri in the process. Honestly, in baseball, I think you call this like a bang-bang play, Raw. The defender and the attacker both seem to get to the ball at the very same time, but VAR upheld the decision. This was a close and gnawing one.
Yeah, again, it looked initially like a fairly obvious penalty, and I think in a lot of these situations you can tell from the defender. If the defender's not outraged, they probably know they're guilty. If they look really outraged, they probably also know they're guilty and are pretending they don't. It's when they look shocked. If a defender looks genuinely shocked, you know it's probably not a penalty. Because they're not, ultimately they are, I mean, they're all gifted actors, footballers, but they're not Oscar winners. They're not method. They're not right in there.
The only one who is Ashley Young's bloody Meryl Streep.
Yeah, Ashley Young's probably the exception. Ashley Young could definitely get an Emmy, like a daytime Emmy. He's probably got a daytime Emmy.
I think he won about 27 that Susan Lucci didn't get. But yes, when you think about Meryl Streep, she can be so many people. And then the question is, but who could play Meryl Streep? I think really the only answer is Ashley Young. He's that talented.
He is the full package. He's a triple threat. He'll give away penalties. He'll get booked. He'll shout at a referee. No, I mean, Ait-Nouri looked, I think, like he knew.
I think you've just cracked the code. So I'll stand down on that one. Haaland slapped the ball home. I like to believe he tells himself before a penalty that the ball is Roy Keane's head in those moments. But credit Wolves, they fleetingly did, despite injuries which have taken from their ranks such cunning schemers of Pedro Neto. They did try and play progressive football through City's lines, but honestly, they were helpless. 35 minutes, Rodri stole the ball in the middle of the park, exchanged passes with KDB, then just floated a ball back stick, knowing that the monster who lives under the bridge in all of those childhood fairy tales about trolls, Erling Haaland, was lurking, big air, don't care. He just soared over Semedo. It was like watching Vince Carter dunk on Frederick Weiss. If Vince Carter had come of age in Norway, boom shakalaka. Then a second penalty, this one conceded by Czech's note Semedo on the verge of a bizarro hat-trick, enabled Haaland to smash home a third from the spot, 24th goal of the season, 9th hat-trick for City, I think 6 in the Premier League. Second against Wolves. I mean, just every time he scores now, it's just some ridiculous statistical achievement. 21st career hat trick. This is silly. 21 hat tricks in 307 games. I mean, this is a man who makes every league a farmers league. Dude, I imagine just has a lockup somewhere, or like a little a garage, or like just for you storage in Salford or something. And you just go there and he casually pulls up that rolling door, and just dozens of signed hat-trick balls after hat-trick balls just immediately come rolling, bouncing out. It's incredible.
Would it not be more like the storage facility at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark? Just loads of crates, and it's in the middle of some sort of cryotherapy chamber that allows him to rejuvenate. But just kind of just loads of people just wheeling all of his awards down into the musty depths of his cavernous trophy cabinet. Do you know what? A hat trick with 2 penalties is a bit cheap. It's a bit of a cheap hat trick. Come on, Erling, grow up.
Well, he kind of did. Because Wolves were now
scoring a beauty. Yeah,
news must have crackled through because Wolves were like, essentially at that point were playing like they were in Cancun with Patrick Beverley. They did have the temerity to grab one back. Pep's Korean guy, Hwang. Fleeting hope for Arsenal fans. I think it lasted for all of 30 seconds. News crackled round the field. Haaland heard that Rory Smith thought that his hat trick was a bit cheap. That can be the only explanation, Raw. It was really incredible because what followed next made it the first ever Premier League game to have the first 5 goals scored by players whose surname begins with the letter H. Edison flung a pass to Foden, sprung who else? Speeding Haaland, the most terrifying kind. His first touch, sloppy. League 1-ish, maybe. Roy Keane, but he recovered, cut inside Kilman, laced an arrow from immense distance by his standards. 58 goals in 59 starts for Manchester City. 2 more goals off the bench sprinkled in. That wobble, that Haaland wobble, Raw, when his ginormous but young body seemed to kind of buckle in the intensity of this season's football calendar. I mean, it was all of 3 weeks ago. Seems to be suddenly a memory. He snapped back into that beast mode of the last season 52 goal campaign.
Yeah, he has actually had quite an injury hit campaign, Haaland. There's been a couple of spells now where he's been in and out of the team at best, missing for a little while and then coming back. Nothing serious, he's not had 6 months on the sidelines. But he's missed a fair few games, and the fact that he is still going to be top scorer by a reasonable distance. There's been a bit more of a competition maybe than we'd have expected, but he's going to win that by 4 or 5 goals at least, barring anything strange happening. Just kind of shows the level of dominance that he has, that City have, the remarkable consistency that he can show. He can score every type of goal. He scores every type of goal relentlessly. He should probably put other people on penalties. Does it, maybe spread it around a little bit, Erling? But he is human. So obviously when he's had injuries and he's not fully fit, he needs a little bit of time to get up to speed. But once he's up to speed, you're not catching him.
I am a human and I need to be loved. Erling's actually coming on Wednesday. And I do want to talk to him about Pep said post game Erling is, quote, back to business. But when he got subbed out, it was amazing. Scored 4 goals. And I don't know if he was disappointed that Rory Smith said that doesn't really count. 2 of them were penalties, Erling, because he was seething on the bench, this man. If you look at it, this man-child, after scoring 4 times. And then Julian Alvarez just strolled on and within 3 minutes got a 5th for City. Such an immense talent, Julian Alvarez. A mere cameo role. His 100th game for City, 35th goal, still just a role player. That is City's cavalcade of talents. They're like the Robert Altman movie of football. And the way they play football, all of that possession, rather than the frenzied press, transition, counter-attacking, almost means that talented constellation that they do have are, I mean, they are shattered, yes, but fresher than the exhausted legs of your Arsenals and your Liverpools. Hence this demolition. A game in which there were the 3 points, sense of job done, goal difference continuing to be closed. But above all, it was not what they did, it was how they did it, Raw. Manchester City, they do start to feel at a certain point like footballing ultimacy, unflappable, bereft of nerves with this performance. They won up to Arsenal everywhere. There was like, you won 3-0, we'll be up 3-0 at halftime. You caused a degree of anxiety to crackle amidst your stadium. We will do this without breaking sweat. We'll simply unleash Haaland with his settings turned up to unplayable. Let him dunk on all comers, thrash from distance for him, win a penalty, dispatch two. The question I've got to ask you is this title just going to play out like 2019, where both teams win out and City just remain inevitable at the title of mortal lock?
2019 and 2022, same things happened. That the two teams involved, City and in that case Liverpool, in this case Arsenal, just win. And I don't know whether. So in this context, it does look an awful lot like we're sitting around waiting for a slip, for a twist in the title race, when we've probably had it. The twist in the title race was when Arsenal lost to Villa. That was the moment where everything flipped, and that is the run-in. It was, I think, 6 or 7 games left. That was the moment where someone blinked. Ultimately, Liverpool blinked the same day, and Liverpool continued to blink to the extent that they actually shut their eyes fully for some time. But Arsenal opened their eyes again and went again. It may well be that we look back on this season and say, all right, well, yeah, the twist, that was in the middle of April when Arsenal lost at home to Unai Emery's Aston Villa. There is a strange sensation about title races involving this Manchester City, and I think it's fair enough to acknowledge it. It won't be something that City fans will recognise. City fans will say, well, you're only saying that because City win them. But it's not really normal to see a team who's now been involved in at least 3 of these, 2 with Liverpool, 1 with Arsenal, not drop any points. The City in all 3 haven't blinked at all, and that is pretty unusual. It's very special for City fans, but it leaves everybody else with this slight sense of a false race. It doesn't really feel like a race. It feels like 2 people running very fast with very little chance of one catching the other. But they're in separate lanes. They're not touching. There's no hurdles. There's no corners. There's no bends. There's no chance for anyone to accelerate. Everyone's running as fast as they can, and the person at the front is the quickest, and that will remain the case.
Raw, you're so rational. It is heartbreaking. It does feel this weekend when we got on. I did say this. It felt. I love the football. I love the goals, but it just seemed like the twist, the turns. Premier League script writers do better, is what I'm saying. Do better. I love the idea, and we'll talk about them, Liverpool, in a moment. Are you asleep? No, I'm just resting my eyes. Pep Guardiola broke down what comes next articulately. He said, 1 week left, 3 games left, 9 points, we will be champions. 7-6 or 3 points, Arsenal will win the Premier League. 2 trips to London upcoming for City, Fulham, and Spurs. A number of the media in England raised this point. One of them, Miguel Delaney, most articulately, he said, you do wonder what the viewing figures are after Manchester City go 1-0 up in games like this. It's not quite the dramatic title race that we anticipated. We will talk about your Liverpool in one moment, King Raw. But first, this morning, Brighton 1, Aston Villa 0, a clash between 2 managers who love risk, embracing it, playing transitional, daring football. One club this season thriving, the other the season of treading water. Brighton spending, quote, a tough moment, as Roberto De Zerbi said from beneath his hair gelled spikes. Both teams injury list debilitated. Villa quite comfortable, we thought, before kickoff in 4th spot. Shocked at home, it needs to be said, in the Conference League semi-final by Olympiacos. They look shattered of mind and of leg. This game, honestly, a slow burner. both teams trying to goad the other into actually, possessing the ball. Brighton tactically dispense with their suicidal high line. They'd let Villa thrash 6 goals past them on just 38% possession in the reverse fixture. And so it was a stale game. Only excitement in the first half. Villa's second string goalkeeper, Olsen, going down injured, then bouncing up to save defiantly from a surging Pascal Gross. Second half, not much better. How Pedro had a penalty save by Olsen, but then the ball span up and Pedro himself headed it in as if he'd created an alley-oop opportunity. Young Brazilian's 20th goal of the season gave Brighton their first league win since March the 10th. First loss in over a month for Aston Villa. It's 40 years since they last played in the Champions League, or the equivalent European Cup as it was, the elite club competition of the day. That wobble gave Tottenham a slither of hope. They are 7 points back before kickoff from fourth with 2 games in hand. They go to Olympiacos on Thursday now to try and wrestle something back in that tie there. When you watch Villa, Raw, is it just a case of a truly shattered team having given their all this season, running on vibes and fumes and hoping that'll get them home? It will get them home for the rest of the season.
Yeah, so I'm slightly different on Villa to quite a lot of the kind of accepted wisdom over here. I don't know about in the US, but I think Villa have got quite a deep squad. When they lost to Olympiacos on Thursday, there was a lot of kind of reaction that centered on, well, it's only Aston Villa, they're stretched to the bone, they're really struggling here. And you look at the bench and you think, hang on, there's about 200 million quid's worth of players there. They're not stretched. They've been rotated. They've had injuries, as everybody's had this season, apart from Arsenal. So they're stretched to an extent, but I think they've got the depth to cope with the fact they've gone deep into 2 competitions. I think what happened today is that the losing at home to Olympiacos knocked the life out of them to an extent. Their season, they must know to a degree that they're going to finish fourth, or that they are heavy favourites to finish fourth, because while Spurs do have those games in hand, they are against quite good teams. Villa will fancy their chances of getting that one win that they need, really, on the final day of the season to seal a place in the Champions League, and they might not even need that, to be perfectly honest. So I think for a while they've been looking at the Conference League as their trophy, their big moment, the big crowning glory. We've seen what it means to the teams that have won it in previous years. Villa are a prime candidate to take that trophy and build something new on the back of it, effectively. And to lose to Olympiacos, a team they were really, really heavily fancied to beat at home when they'd been so keyed up for it, I think that's a real sucker punch. And today, certainly, they struggled to recover from it.
Oh, Conference League, the best conference since Yalta. Spoiler alert. Oh, Tottenham would not take advantage of this opportunity. They choked it away. Oh, it's like watching James Harden in the playoffs. Liverpool 4, Tottenham Hotspur 2. Jurgen Klopp's penultimate game at Anfield, actually against childhood Liverpool fan Ange Postecoglou. 2 teams, spirited teams that have given their fans joy. Yes, Spurs, your team did at one point in the season give you joy, but deflating at the last. Liverpool out of the 3-horse title race after dropping 10 points in their last 5 games. Spurs have actually gone one better. Well done, Spurs. You bled 11 points over the same period. Champions League 4th place race, just barely alive. But before we get into the football, we've got to note something different about Jurgen Klopp going into this game, Raw. I mean, this season has definitely, for sad reasons, come to an early end in terms of possibility in silverware. But he's cutting a completely different figure in the pre-match press conference. It's like a weight has been lifted, the angst, the pressure, the terse tetchiness. Spent a lot of Friday just deciding to unload on the TNT broadcasters who own the 12:30 English kickoff time, 7:30 a.m. Eastern time here in the United States. He blamed it as one of the primary causes of, quote, fatigue and exhaustion for footballers. He said 12:30 kickoffs are a crime. This is a real quote, this. He said, I was actually waiting for Amnesty International to go to them. It's like no pressure, no anxiety, no meaning to these ceremonial games that we're watching. These exhibition games have become pure celebration. Just and it almost This period has become an expression of collective gratitude for the journeys he's taken us on, and the dreams he's allowed Liverpool fans to share.
There was a point a few weeks ago where Emma Hayes, who's leaving Chelsea Women to take over a minor national team somewhere, I forget which one, um, where she seemed to be kind of late March. She seemed to have decided there were a few things she wanted to get off her chest before she left, and one of them was quite controversial. She talked about whether relationships in women's soccer between players and coaches were appropriate, and I think most people probably think they're probably not. And she also went a bit further and said that from a coaching point of view, relationships between players and players are not really that helpful, which is a different thing to what was kind of reported. I can see why a coach would think this is a less than ideal circumstance for me to do my job. But anyway, it was obviously something that Emma Hayes feels and she wanted to kind of express. And then she had a very sort of punchy few words for Jonas Eidevall, who's the manager of Arsenal Women, who, and I'm reading between the lines here a little bit, I think Emma Hayes doesn't like. I think Emma Hayes maybe just isn't that keen on Jonas Eidevall and didn't want to leave the WSL without telling Jonas that she's not that keen. And there's a little bit similar with Jurgen Klopp in the last couple of weeks since Liverpool fell out of the title race, since it became clear that these games are essentially exhibitions now. It's a chance for Liverpool players some of them maybe to secure their futures, some of them to say thank you to Klopp, some of them just to have a bit of fun. He's been willing to speak a little bit more openly than he would be if he felt that something he said might have an impact on the squad or might be taken the wrong way. I think there's an element of he wants to say a few things before he goes. So yeah, TNT got it both barrels on Friday, slightly harshly, I think. The Amnesty International thing's probably, knowing Klopp, it'll be a joke, but it's not. The English football media does not have a brilliant sense of humour. But it does make you wonder what he's going to say ahead of the next two games. Who else?
Do you imagine he's going to line up every journo and just tell each one of them what he really thinks about them?
In which case I will not attend the press conference.
I never liked
and now we move on to the liars. Yeah, I don't know. There's a few, I suspect the last one will be very heartrending and emotional and touching, because I think Jurgen Klopp ultimately has enjoyed being in English football an enormous amount. But before Villa, if he's got a few straws to settle, it might be worth tuning in.
Oh, the last one is gonna be like, oh my god, it's gonna be like a bit like ET. Just that last scene. It's gonna be a tearjerker. It's gonna be like when Bing Bong just slowly disappears in Inside Out. I can't handle it. Even the thought of it right now. The last sane man left in Great Britain, just leaving us. The reverse fixture though, early in the season, you'll remember it, dear listeners, won by Spurs. Um, After that Luis Diaz goal that was cruelly, wrongly disallowed, Spurs, though, had won just once at Anfield in their last 29 visits. The game began when Mo Salah restored after his sideline RG Bargy with one Jurgen Klopp, which was explained really well by Alan Shearer, brilliantly in a piece in which he talked about what it felt like for him to be left out as a great striker in the later stages of his career, how you rage against it, how you despise it, said Alan Shearer. And from the off, Salah was sprightly and hungry, hit the bar with a running floater in the early exchanges. Emerson Royale switched off then. Mo flickered in to a floated ball and just nodded home. Brilliant run, fine header by the baldest haired man in football, or the hairiest bald man. I can never quite work it out. But it had to be Mo opening the scoring for Liverpool in this moment, right, Raw? Or else the league we love to watch. This is a crazy idea, and floating is not scripted, because we know it is scripted, and it had to be Mo Salah opening the goal.
It did, because that's what the narrative demanded. But weirdly, that is his first goal from open play for a while, Salah. He's also taken
9 games.
The cheap Haaland route of taking penalties. And I think since he scored the winner against Brighton, which was start of April, late last day of March, maybe. It's been a while since Salah scored a goal from open play, and he was helped in his quest to do so by Emerson Royale not doing any marking at all, or even, to be honest, paying attention.
He's ever more or less a professional footballer, more what they call a hamburger in France. But Liverpool playing with true freedom Honestly felt like there's a new phase they've entered. There was that adrenaline win at all costs era, which took place right after the Klopp resignation. And then that was followed by the awfully sad reaction, the adrenaline all burnt off, April bubble bursting. But it feels like we've segued into a third period, just like the exhibition, razzle drazzle, free form, celebration, so many chances. I think like 13 first half shots. Andy Robertson made it 2-0 on the stroke of half time. A Mo half volley parried towards the tenacious Scott, stabbed home from close range. All smiles for the Liverpool players as they trotted off at half time. Tottenham, however, a stark contrast. They've been handed a Champions League lifeline by Villa's loss, but they decided, no, we won't phone a friend. We will just add to that just darkness, that flailing, that lost legs, both in attack and their will to live at the back. It was an incredible moment at halftime. Vicario, the goalkeeper, had to sprint from his line to separate the quite calamitous Emerson Royale from Romero. They're having a spat. They're having words. They're over reenacting the Mo Salah, Jurgen Klopp thing. But it looked a little more aggro than that. And what we know is Spurs leaking at the back. Son, first Asian player to run up 300 Premier League games, huge achievement, was a ghost in that first half. And Raw, he and Salah, I mean, this is something that links them both. They have both been shades of what we think about them in our imagination since the tournaments in January. Mo Salah returned injured from the Africa Cup of Nations. He's not been the same since that. Could you say the same about the Spurs attack? Big Ange clearly doesn't trust Richarlison. Sonny been dead of leg after being flogged by Jurgen Klinsmann in the Asian Cup. I think he played every minute of all 6 of the tournament games, 2 extra times. He just looks battered.
Yeah, Son's dropped off, which is really unusual for Son, because he's probably, in terms of performance levels, obviously, or maybe not quite in terms of goals, but in terms of performance levels, he's probably the most consistent attacker in the Premier League. You never see Son have a bad game. You rarely see him have a quiet one, and if he does, it tends to be because the opposition have defended him brilliantly. He's had a bit of a downturn in the last 3 months. Whether that's because of the Asian Cup or whether it mirrors what's happened to Spurs, I don't know. Do Spurs have had the reverse Bournemouth of the season, that they were flying until October, and Ange was the toast of the town? It's really hard not to like Ange, not to buy into a lot of the things that he says, not to feel that he's quite a refreshing presence in an industry where there is a lot of jargon and a lot of bullshit, and doesn't indulge in either. But it's equally hard to say that since January, February, Spurs have been playing well.
Let's talk about Ange. With some heaviness in my heart, I've got to say, Liverpool went on to score twice more effortlessly. Gakpo nodding him on the back post like Gakpo Calvert-Lewin. Then an extreme live wire, Harvey Elliott, scousiest looking non-scouser that ever scoused, scored a thunderous fourth from Caitlin Clark range. Klopp looking on, beaming like a proud Teutonic woodcutter who'd breathed life to a wooden child in his work shed. Mini Spurs, glimmer of hope, Richarlison. Oh, come back to Everton, Rich. He clipped home a goal, which meant I think did mean more for Everton fans, just in the memory of him doing it for the Blues so many times in derbies than it did for the ultimate outcome of the game. Sonny did add second for Tottenham, which made it a bit lols, mildly leaky bum entertaining. But Tottenham, as you say, they didn't taste defeat in their opening 10 games. It was magnificent. Ange came on, took his victory lap with grace and humility and life wisdom. But they've gone on to lose 11 of their last 25, including 4 games straight now for the first time in 2 bloody decades. Ange, I love Big Ange, just to be candid. I adore him as a human being. I respect and admire his managerial journey that he's on, but he is cutting such a withered, frustrated figure. Since the start of April, Spurs have won 4 points, worst run than anyone apart from Luton and Sheffield United. I think they've got a -9 goal difference in that period. He said this week, we need change. Change has to happen. My Australian accent is for shit. I've got to change this squad. I've got to build a squad I think can play our football. There has to be exits. Speaking to a couple of my hardcore season ticket holding Spurs fans, they said there's a frustration growing there with the old guard, with Ange, his unwillingness to adapt. As you say, this dude won the Premier League in September. Came on this show. He did say there would be difficult periods in his first year. I think he meant more at the beginning than the end. It's gone the reverse for him. And we know this is a man, Raw, who uses a word mate a lot, uses it a lot. There are a lot of mates, in the fall, a lot of mates of joy and affection, a lot more sharpened mates in these press conferences of distancing and prickly kind of mate. The mate of a back off man. That's the harshest mate of all to the ear. So, Roy, where are you on Ange right now?
In sort of 3 different positions, which probably doesn't help. So my main one
Mate.
is, if my Australian accent's quite good actually. The I use it when I'm cheating at cricket. The
Oh my, by the way, well, all my accents are equally bad. It's like genuinely, I have many weaknesses. It's probably top 10.
I think I'm quite good at accents, but lots of people think they're quite good at accents and aren't. But so I think this is really important to remember that, and it actually funny enough applies to an extent to Liverpool, that if Spurs had had their season in reverse, if they'd had difficult early days and come back really strongly to finish 5th, maybe 4th, people would be saying, Ange Postecoglou's really building something here. This is the next season. Oh, next season Spurs. Oh, you want to watch out for Spurs next season. Let him get a few bodies in. Let him get a few players he likes. They'll be a real force. But because they've had the strong start fade away, we tend to assume that something's gone horribly wrong. Whereas the reality is, this is probably just what Spurs are. Spurs are probably the 5th best team in the country at the moment. I think financially that's where they should be, more or less. It's slightly unusual that it's Villa ahead of them rather than, say, United or Chelsea. But ultimately, Spurs finishing 5th is basically the universe being perfectly normal, to be perfectly honest. And that is probably relevant, that Spurs will get a finish under Postecoglou roughly where they were meant to be. At the same time, they played much better football than they did under Conte or Mourinho or Nuno, that brief spell that he was there. So you can kind of understand why Spurs fans were so taken with Ange initially, and he did have that remarkable impact. The flip side of that, I think, is that their early season run was a little bit misleading, because I think they played a lot of teams in the bottom 10. They beat Liverpool in unusual circumstances, and they got a point against City, which is a tremendous result. And they beat Manchester United, which seemed harder at the time than it does now. And I don't know whether that was a slight degree of false promise. Yeah, a little bit of misdirection from the script writers. And they have run off the rails. And there is part of me, this is my dirty little secret, Rog, because obviously we're all meant to, as young, sort of forward-thinking, progressive football fans, you are meant to be like, well, look, the philosophy has to come first. What Postecoglou's doing, the way they play will get more points than chopping and changing and being more pragmatic. You don't want to be pragmatic. It teaches the players the wrong lessons. But at the same time, if you're conceding loads of goals, just stop conceding loads of goals. Even if it means you have to draw a game 0-0 and create no chances. Just psychologically, there is part of me that thinks it's quite important, if you're losing football matches and conceding a load of chances, just to shut up shop for a bit. Stop taking risks. Stop playing a high line. And I can understand why fans get frustrated with managers who are so wedded to their philosophies that they refuse to change, even though the fans must look at it from the stadium and think, well, this is stupid, because you're doing the same thing as you did last week, and it didn't work then, and it's not working now.
It's reverse David Moyes, as we will discuss. But Liverpool fans, just 2 more games left under Jurgen Klopp. What a celebration in this game for huge swaths of time. The Liverpool crowd singing Jurgen's song non-stop. It's very striking because he's asked historically that the crowd not sing for him, that the cop don't sing his name. But you got to imagine that today and during the Wolves game to come, that is pretty well all he's going to hear. And at the final whistle, it was fascinating watching him deliver his iconic post-match, the 3 fist pumps. For the penultimate time, a word he learned in a press conference. Oh, penultimate, yeah. I want to ask Jurgen Klopp, why he does the hugs, thinking he'd have some shrewd, like man management, tactical insight as to why he does them so often. And he just looked at me and he laughed and he goes, "The hugs? Those are for me." I'm watching this moment today after a win, which honestly meant very little in the scheme of things. You could tell today's fist bumps, the fist bumps which have been a signal to the cop in title chases past. We need you. We're in this together. Let's remember where we've been. Let's remember where we're going. Let's do this again. Today, those fist bumps were very much for him. That he's a man freed from an enormous weight, savoring every single second of his time at Anfield, just a special, special place for him. Um, Savoring the profound emotional bond that he's worked so bloody hard to foster and forge and it's never a given maintain with all of the players, the entire club staff, because he went and hugged everybody at the end, every steward that he could get his hands on, and perhaps Raw, most enduringly of all, with the cop. But he is actively making memories in these last few seconds that he has.
I think he believes, and he's probably right to believe that the time has come. I think he's doing what's best for him. He knows his energy levels. He knows that he doesn't have the appetite or the hunger or whatever it might be to go into next season, to go through another ringer of a season with Liverpool. He needs time off. He needs to recharge. But I don't think he's fallen out of love with managing or with his players or with the club. I don't think he doesn't want it to be a sad goodbye. It's not the goodbye he wants it to be. There was a point where he would have at least hoped for kind of a Europa League trophy and maybe a bus parade or something. He's not going to get that. So I think he wants to treasure the last few moments, the last few bits of being Liverpool manager. He's not trying to downplay how emotional it is for him, and I think that's quite significant. He is an emotional character. That's part of what's made him so successful, and he's going to feel his feelings, Rog, which is something we could all learn from.
There's so much that we can learn from that human being. I can't wait to hear what the sculpture of him is going to be outside of Anfield. I've said before, I'll say again, I do think that it should just be him in an open armed hug so that Liverpool fans from all over the world can travel to Anfield and just insert themselves inside Jurgen Klopp's arms. As someone that's been on the receiving end of a Jurgen Klopp hug, I can say it's life-changing, it's therapeutic. For a minute, I felt mildly optimistic, which is a lot even for me. But to have that man just hugging the air so that Liverpool fans can post an Instagram photo of themselves getting, even from a cement or bronze or whatever you make the sculpture from, will be utterly, utterly beautiful.
That's a brilliant idea. That's probably the best idea you've ever had.
You could even call it the hug, couldn't you?
Yeah, you just call it a hug.
Yeah,
and
in
let people
sport,
touch
you've
it.
got the shot, you've got the
Yeah.
pass, the hug.
And just make it an interactive statue. I mean, I think you phrased it slightly indelicately by saying that you could have Liverpool fans inserting themselves into Jurgen Klopp. That's not a great idea. But assuming it's not used like that, I think it's a brilliant. That's a brilliant gimmick.
It is. When you get on it, Liverpool fans, it would be just a delicious. No, by the way, first Everton fan to snap the hands off. Don't you do it? We got the hands. We got the arm. We took out the saws that we hacked the guy who connected to the goalpost. We used that buzzsaw. We got a Klopp's arms. Don't do it.
We've talked on European Nights, haven't we, about the Totti mural in Rome?
Yeah.
That in Monte, the central bit of Rome, there's this famous sort of silhouetted image of Francesco Totti, and every 3 to 6 months, Lazio fans will go and deface it, and then Roma fans will come back and repaint it, and then another few weeks will go by, and then the Lazio fans will come back and deface it, and it's just this sort of eternal battle for kind of that wall.
Arms.
But so someone could get a commission to permanently make Jurgen Klopp's hands.
Yeah.
Just do we need another pair? Dad. All right, go and get the cast. Come on. I think
fire up the forge, son. Oh my god!
The Blues have been back. Come on.
The Blues are back, Dad. By the way, in other teams with coaching uncertainty, well, I don't think they'll be commissioning the sculptures. Chelsea 5, West Ham 0. A derby battle of truly imperiled managers. One oddly, Pochettino giving off surreally, I am out of here, please fire me vibes after beating Spurs 2-0 midweek. In his team's most complete performance of the season, he said post-game, I can't say nothing. If we want to match the history of Chelsea, it's a lot of work to do. And David Moyes of West Ham grimly holding on to his job, almost in the style at this point, like a Scottish George Costanza with the Yankees. Even as West Ham are publicly courting old Wolves friend Julian Lopetegui to take over next season. And well, they might, because West Ham are back on what is dead may never die settings. Jared Bowen, well done, mate. Hit the woodwork 3 times, which I think is an Ashley Young hat trick. And they conceded their 70th Premier League goal of the season, the most a David Moyes side has ever shipped in a single campaign. He can't even David Moyes anymore. That's where he is. Cole Palmer got his 21st Premier League goal. Without Cole Palmer, Chelsea would be essentially like Everton without Jordan Pickford. Nico Jackson showed that his bald Nico Jackson alter ego might be the centre forward that they've cried out for all season after all. I think tactically in football, it's called a reverse Samson, what Nico's done. West Ham fans sang, we've got the ball, we've got the ball, we've got, whenever their team actually attacked. Winless in 4, grim times. I feel David Moyes a very, very good man who I am so unbelievably fond of. And God bless. Don't worry, David. I've got a feeling you're going to end up back at Everton sometime, somehow, and we'll love you for it. But what a week for Poch, Raw. What's going on? Man is at the phase of his management tenure at Chelsea where he's meant to burn it all down, isn't he? But he's treating Chelsea almost like an Airbnb, that he's afraid he won't get his deposit back, and frantically tidying up before he leaves.
But at the same time, if you're Chelsea, why would you sack Pochettino?
Because Chelsea.
Because Chelsea. And because if they sack him, maybe they could hire 4 managers in his place. That's the best reason.
It's amazing.
There have been moments like flickers this season where you look
at... That's the kind of thing Brighton would do, that kind of innovative thing. You hire 2 managers, one who could take over, one could do the night shift, one could do the day shift, share the same bed. Factory workers used to in the early 20th century. Just have that competitive advantage. Our manager is working 24/7 around the clock,
just planning training sessions, coming up with press conference sound bites. I don't think it's a 24-hour job, if I'm honest. You definitely don't need 2 of them.
Shooting the watch commercials. Somebody's got to do it. It's amazing.
That's the other thing I noticed in Germany, actually, is there's so many commercials with Jurgen Klopp in them. He might be leaving Liverpool just because he's got too many advertising commitments.
On German television? Is that
on German television?
At the end of the day, he's like, do I want to be a football manager or a hand model? The hand modeling just became too all-consuming. I have to give my life to it. Producer J-Dubs, we have got to Google Jurgen Klopp German commercials and start to make reels of these things. I can't wait to see them, but go on. Truthweiter!
The one of them actually is quite funny. It's all about, you'll see.
About what? It's about what?
It's all about kind of the theme of the advert is what he's going to do next, but they're all related to Jurgen Klopp things. So one of them, and what sparked my memory, is being a dentist because of the white teeth.
What? I didn't even know, and I just guessed. And when my own bullshit is coming true, Raw, that is when we've true. Am I the Premier League script writer?
I think you might be. That might be the final twist. But in terms of Chelsea, there have been flickers this season when you've looked at them and thought, okay, there's something happening here. And by and large, they've been false dawns. But you do wonder, pressure off. Pochettino will know that if he's going to be there next season, he needs to have something to work with. He needs to have a sense of where this team is going. And the last week, they've shown signs that there are lots of talented footballers there. There is a good manager there. And it is weird that it's taken 10 months for him to look like he's starting to find a way to make it work. But if they finish the season strongly, then it does set them up quite nicely for, an overhaul of another 40 players in the summer. And they're 7th now, so they could get into Europe.
Todd Burley, God bless. As you're up there in heaven, you knew what you were doing all this bloody time, and we doubted you. Chelsea women beat Bristol 8-0 to keep their own title hopes alive. As that Women's Super League goes down to the last. Chelsea's men and women won today by a combined 13-0. Is that good? Again, Todd Burley. Cross London, there was one game, two mid-table teams colliding to see who was more on the beach. Brentford nil, Fulham nil. Rory loved it. 90 minutes that will be forgotten to history. Notable only because Ivan Toney won some probs, not future Arsenal goal machine. Extended his barren goalless spell to 10 whole big boy games. To the bowels of the relegation zone, Raw. Sheffield United 1, Nottingham Forest 3. Forest, one of the noisiest narrative loaded relegation battles I have ever seen. And I'm an Everton fan, still waiting for an appeal decision on their points deduction. They started the day on 26 points, tied for that last relegation place with Luton Town, head on goal difference. And in a septic, self inflicted wound of a moment, they announced the conscious uncoupling with referee, official consultant. Yes, that was a thing. Mark Clattenburg. Yes, he is a thing. And he resigned on Friday, said in a statement his work had resulted in, quote, unmerited targeting. Forest, remember, charged by the FA after a controversial social media post Everton defeat, in which they complained about 3 penalties not given, one of which the Referees Association, PGMOL, has admitted was indeed a mistake. But to handle that mistake in the way that Forest did, like a politician, speaking only to their base, was a madness. Clattenburg, now less a referee, more a sensationalist, attracted to any spotlight like a moth to a flame, is now gone. But Raw, can't be long before he signs for Inter Miami, I've got to believe. Is this a chapter closed? Or is it a taste of a footballing future in which teams will just hire spin doctors, pollsters, speechwriters, lobbyists, super lawyers, CIA operatives, just a battery of sue them or spin them, dark arts specialists, almost agents of misdirection? Is that what we're going to be watching?
You're listing a variety of things that already exist in football. That's what's worrying here. That
Is that true?
actually,
The
if you
CIA dark arts people?
maybe not the CIA operatives, although you do hear rumors. Yeah, I think what one of the things actually that on a kind of vaguely serious note that we've seen this season is, and I saw someone on Twitter use the term, and I'm stealing it from them, is sort of postmodern soccer, where the one thing that has always been true about football is what happens on a Saturday or Sunday or sometimes a Monday night, Tuesday and Wednesday for European games, Thursday Conference League.
Sometimes 12:30, sod
Some,
you, TBS,
sometimes
whatever you
sometimes in the morning. That you whatever happens, like whatever stuff goes on during the week, like there's a game at the end of it, and the game is true. The game is unequivocal. It can't be debated. Like a result happens, there is a scoreline. And although sometimes that scoreline might feel unjust, you have to accept it. We've actually started seeing now that more and more teams aren't really happy with that arrangement, and there's a desire to relitigate things. You know, Klopp jokingly called for a replay after the Spurs game, the first Spurs game. We've then seen teams challenge decisions, demand the release of audio from the VAR room. Joan Laporta, the Barcelona president, asked for the Clásico to be replayed a couple of weeks ago because of a much less controversial decision than the Luis Diaz goal. You know, Forest, the first team to appoint someone basically to try and chirp away at the referees, does he knows them, to get decisions to go in their favour. You know, effectively saying we believe that refereeing can be modified and malleable and contorted to suit our wishes. This is all quite bad. I don't think football needs this to happen, to be perfectly honest. And that is, so I think, yeah, Clattenburg, trailblazer as ever, was the first referee analyst. And he wasn't an analyst, he was a lobbyist. He was employed as a lobbyist. That's what he was there to do. But I suspect he won't be the last.
God, this is where we're going. It's like the Walking Dead was very popular, and then the show we just talked about, The Walking Dead, The Talking Dead, became enormous. Essentially, that is what football is going to become. The 90 minutes are going to become de minimis. It's the talking about those 90 minutes which is going to fill our lives. By the way, Clattenburg, who has been on this show, find his appearance, Google it. If you really want to be utterly entertained going inside that man's mind. I know you're listening to this show, and Clattenburg Trailblazer has to be your autobiography title, a gift from Rory Smith. Forest actually needed Clats early on. Defensive liability. Montiel dove in on Brereton as if he was a Luton supporting town match official. Ben Britton Diaz, by the way, the single footballer who looks most like Brad Pitt in Legends of the Fall, smashed home the penalty, but then Forest opened up a can of whoop-ass. Callum Hudson-Odoi just in the mire of a relegation race, just went SpaceX, smashing the ball with venom and arc in the most sublime way. Captain Yates scored his first goal of the season, celebrated with real beauty. This was a lovely moment. A guy who is, I think, the only youth academy graduate in Forest team, who gives his all week in, week out. He's that kind of a player. Hudson Odoi finish it off with another moment of wonder. Thank you to OMG Base Guard who introduced me to the term absolute piss missile, which is both made me vomit a little bit in my mouth, but it's also just an incredible piece of phrasing. Sheffield United have conceded 2 or more in 10 straight top flight games, only the 14 to do that in the Premier League era, minus 72 goal difference. It's also quite an achievement. Conceded 100 goals on the season. Chapeau, first to do that in a 38-game English top flight campaign since Leicester City in 1909, which is not nothing, Sheffield United. You've made your mark, but bloody hell, what a season of misery for that deeply passionate, deeply faithful fan base. I can't think of a more, I'm an Everton fan, and I can't think of a more miserable journey.
I've got a friend who's a Bournemouth fan, and he's always said to me that he quite likes being in the Championship because generally, this season's a bit different. Generally, Bournemouth in the Premier League play 38, lose 27, of which they probably lose 20 of them relatively easily. And after a while, that's quite depressing. If you factor in just how bad this season has been for Sheffield United, they will go to the Championship with open arms. They'll be delighted to be there. There's
Hope.
been
It's hope.
well, there's been very few bright spots for them this season. You know, Oliver Arblaster, the midfield, has come through and looks really promising. They'll try and rebuild the team around him. But they didn't, they came up, they weren't ready. At no point did they look ready. They never looked like they were going to figure out how to be ready. And it's been a real whimper. And I suspect it'll take a couple of years to get over.
They are to football what I am to accents, but just 38 games times 90 minutes of me trying to do accents. It's humanly unbearable. Poor Burnley capitulated, as they often have, conceding in bunches early and often against Newcastle. Golfing class agonising. Anthony Gordon ran the game. Came just the third Newcastle player to record double-digit goals and assists in a single Premier League season. Even I've got to say, huge respect to a kid grabbing his moment, defining himself. Newcastle quietly moved up to 6. Not bad for a disappointing off-season by their new Saudi standards. Reach Europe. Quite an achievement with that intensive care injury list if they do. Poor Burnley, that late last gasp resurgence does not look like enough. 5 points from safety with 2 games to play. And in a week in which Tom Brady's Birmingham plummeted into League One. Oh, if JJ Watt's Burnley do go down, I'm not sure it's legal to have both NFL owners get relegated in the same season. It's just a terrible look for the US of A. Tomorrow night, Oliver Glasner's resurrected Crystal Palace host Manchester United, 3 p.m. Eastern time. I just want to quickly pick up on one United story, Raw. Thursday, news broke. Sir Jim Ratcliffe sent a scathing email to all United staff telling them that the dirtiness and untidiness of large sections of the club's offices and United's training areas are, quote, a disgrace, which I'm fascinated by because he must have known this would go public, Raw. Does it sound like he's just read Malcolm Gladwell's The Tipping Point? He's trying to fix a club, not with data, not with strategy, but with the old criminological broken windows theory, in which visible minor signs of crime and civil disorder create an environment that encourages further crime and disorder. So the police have to crack down on minor crimes, vandalism, loitering, public drinking, to create a sudden atmosphere of order, lawfulness, uplift. Is Jim Ratcliffe essentially going to send United back to the top of the table by making sure that all of his staff learn to put the toilet seat down, Raw?
Are you directly linking like the fact that the waste paper baskets at the offices are overflowing with Anthony's poor form?
Can you think of a better reason? I thought more just like if people recycle and understand how to move their bottles and glass into a separate area, essentially it's worth plus 12 points on over a 38-game season.
I query to what extent petrochemical engineer Jim Ratcliffe's interested in recycling, but apart from that, I think that Ratcliffe has taken there's two things going on. One is that Jim Ratcliffe is very much in a kind of cleaning house moment. So the other thing that he did was he's urged all of United staff to return to office. He said, look, your days of working from home are over, which is a very boomer thing to do. That is a very kind of, you're all just sitting around, on the internet. You need to be in the office. Mm-hmm. I think most of us have grown up a bit beyond that.
I think he also very quickly found out that United had shrunk their operational space to such a degree that there's not actually enough desks for this returning workforce. But carry on.
But yeah, so there's clearly an element of kind of I'm the new sheriff in town. Things are going to be different on my watch. It's the kind of organizational corporate equivalent of when managers come in and ban ketchup.
Yeah,
that's what's going on.
Antonio Conte.
It's like, well, the ketchup's the problem here, lads. Come on. The Ratcliffe clearly wants to be seen as, look, we've got a new focus with this is corporate culture, blah blah blah. There's a lot of that going on. It's all very linked in. The other thing that's interesting is that there is a degree of mission creep. So Ineos own 25% of Manchester United. The Glazers said to them initially, like, you can do the football bit. We don't really care about that. We don't know what we're doing. Which, is very self-aware of them.
We never liked it.
We don't like it. It's complicated and hard.
We brought a football team.
And people shout at you. So you can have that bit. But now Ineos seem to be in charge of the corporate culture. They're determining whether it's whether they're going to work from home or return to office. They're asking for the way that the club's offices are maintained to be changed, which is all fine. Like, if the club's offices aren't very tidy, they should be tidy. That's fair enough. But that wasn't originally what Ineos were meant to be doing. And it is interesting that the Glazers seem to be stepping further and further back and basically saying, you run this for us and we will take our dividends.
First, they came for the condiments, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a condiment. Quickly, talking about really well-run clubs. Finally, Friday night's amuse-bouche, and I use that word lightly. Luton Town won. Everton Football Club won, which was an unusual experience for me, Raw, watching Everton in a Premier League game that meant absolutely nothing at all. Hence, no anger watching. No existential fear. No need of. I didn't even wear adult diapers to watch. It was all a bit odd. Bit like staring for 90 minutes at that lock screen that Apple has inserted on its Sonoma operating system, the one of that vineyard that just slowly creeps towards you. Everton awarded a penalty by VAR after Luton were called for holding. I felt nothing when we awarded it. DCL, God love him, finished that penalty, 4 goals in his last 5 games. Ciao Bella still felt very little when Adebayo bullied Ashley Young, posterised him and equalised. Felt nothing too. Game just kind of ebbed away, Raw, like sand through an hourglass. It was very weird. Everton, to watch them without hating myself and just doubting my being, my identity, my parenting especially, without feeling impending doom and the feeling that we're all going to die. I didn't like it. Raw, give me my Everton back. I don't even know who they are anymore.
Just this comfortable mid-table existence isn't for you, is it? It's just not. That's not why you got into football.
It's true. I just love. Give me back my hand in the mangle. Give me back my electric shock. Give me back my sadistic fear. It was very odd, honestly, watching the two managers. Rob Edwards of Luton, who's aged like a 2-term president, totally greyed completely now down the side of his hair. That is what a relegation battle does to you. Luton stay in the bottom 3. They need to make up 4 points in goal difference in 2 games. I'm not saying the relegation battle is over, but I'm not saying it either. God bless the Luton fans who still gave Edwards a hero's lap of the ground after the final whistle. But there's got to be some disappointment when you cannot find a way through an extremely disinterested Everton. Tracksuit Sean Dyche, Raw, remains undefeated. GFOP at 1 Benjamin Landry asked the big technical question: does the relegation defying power of Sean Dyche's tracksuit, would it dissipate if washed?
From my understanding of magic, yes.
And the idea that Sean Dyche would wash any of his clothing is just irrisible.
It might depend on whether you use fabric softener. I don't think magic sustains.
Dyche likes the softener. I don't think Dyche.
No, do you know what? I will put money on this. Sean Dyche uses fabric softener.
I think he's an extra starch human being. It's straight bleach by the pint, and not all of it goes on his clothes. By the way, respect to that man. He is active wear Guardiola. I'm actually interviewing Dominic Calvert-Lewin on Thursday, and I promise listeners I will get to the bottom of this late tracksuit diabolical alchemy magic. But my God, it's been a bright side for the Blues in a season of just points deductions, those months long winless agony, and the ongoing disaster class that is the quote takeover from 777. The more we find out, the more shocked we are, but they still are the only hope we have, which is just, oh, we live, we breathe, we are still here. But enough about Everton. I just want to quickly finish with the toast to some good football. Raising this Michelob Ultra to PSV Eindhoven, who emits red flares and spilled beers, won their 25th Eredivisie title in their history, first in 6 long years, by a 28 victory this morning in 32 games. A crown won in some style. They won their first 17 games of the season on the trot. And the joy feels just delirious because it is such an American story. There's a heartbeat to that team that is US men's national team related. Serginho Dest, Malik Tillman, Ricardo Pepe have all surged this season amidst a squad put together by ex-American international Ernie Stewart. This first season there as director of football. I'll just say this, as American fans, I remember the days when we used to lose our crap with joy to watch one of our boys start for your like your Sunderlands or your Fulhams, to see three surge win European domestic titles together. It's something we should never take for granted. Courage, as they say in the Netherlands, moot. And to you, Rory Smith, you beautiful human being, there is no one I would rather spend my Sunday afternoon with than you beautiful human being.
Not even Dominic Calvert-Lewin.
That's Thursday, baby. Dominic Calvert-Lewin. I cannot wait. I'm only sad I'm not going to be able to smell him because he is, pound for pound, the greatest smelling footballer in the world. James Garner going to join him. We've got Erling Haaland coming on. We got European nights. We've got to do it live. Post Real Madrid, Bayern. The battle to save civilization. Wednesday night, I'll be on Morning Joe at 6:45 a.m. tomorrow. You and me are going to spend some more time European nighting tomorrow. You ready for that, Roy? You're going way over your limit that this Surgeon General suggests you expose yourself to some rods. You do know that, right?
Well, it's in, these busy weeks in April and May. This is when everything, comes together. This is when you want to be talking about the Champions League and also mainly the Conference League.
This is the Rog part of the season, is what you're saying. Rog, for the third time in this one podcast, referring to himself in the third person, which is signal that we are way over time. So until tomorrow, this is Rog saying, big love, courage, Kung Fu Fight in America.